Hey everybody, Mr. K here, coming to you from the Herberg Science Laboratory, room 129. I have a science demonstration for you today. We have been learning a lot about living things. Living things are made up of cells, and in each of those cells is DNA. DNA act like instructions for the cell to tell the cell how to behave, what its job is, and how to function. So we can extract that DNA from a living thing, and we are going to extract the DNA from a banana. You can also use other things like strawberries work well as well. All these supplies here you could probably find at home. We're using some dish detergent, some salt, some isopropyl alcohol. The isopropyl alcohol needs to be very cold, so you can put it in your freezer. It will not freeze in your freezer. The freezing temperature is much lower than water, so it'll stay liquid even in your freezer if you keep it in there all day. Some warm water, a couple of beakers to hold the solutions. I've got a teaspoon here to measure out some substances. We have a plastic bag, a stirring rod to stir up the solution and to try to get the DNA out of it, and also a strainer. Okay, so first thing that we need to do is we're going to take a little bit of the salt here, about a teaspoon of salt, and we are going to put it in our warm water. Use the stirring rod to stir it up and make sure the salt all gets dissolved. Okay. Next step will be to measure out about 10 milliliters of dish detergent. So, about that much. Okay. Now, the next part, and arguably the most fun part, is we smush the banana. So, take the banana in here. We're going to put it inside here, okay, and we're going to start smushing it. You want to make sure that it is super duper smushed. You want to make sure that it is completely mushy, almost liquidy. Okay. Squish it real good. Don't want to spill any out of the bag. Okay, so here we go. It's pretty smushed up, as you guys can see. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some of these materials here. We're going to pour in some of this salty water. So it's kind of liquidy. Okay. And we are going to add the dish detergent. So you learned that cells have a barrier called a membrane that separates the inside from the outside. Now the membrane is made up of fats, and we know, anyone who's ever done the dishes before, you know that dish detergent is really good at breaking up fats and greases and such. So what happens here is the dish detergent breaks down the cell membranes so that the cells come apart, and then the DNA comes out. The salt helps to keep the DNA in a strand rather than having it come apart. So I'm just mushing it here. You can't really see on the camera, but I'm mushing it up and mixing it. It can be a little sudsy. You want to try to keep it as little bit of suds as possible. And make sure it's nice and mushy. It's got to be almost like liquid, kind of like pudding. So you can see it looks kind of gross now, but there we go. Right. Now, next step is we're going to take an empty beaker, right? And we're going to, this is tricky here, I got to use a lot of hands. So we're going to set this up, and I will move the screen here so you can see it better. Okay, I've got the funnel here over the beaker, the strainer over the beaker. And now that it's kind of all mixed up, we're going to gently drop it into the strainer. And you can see that it's dripping down into the bottom beaker. We're going to let it do that for a little bit. We're going to let it get strained out so we can get maybe about 10 milliliters or so of the liquid. I'm going to use the stirring rod to kind of mix it up a little bit and help the liquid get down there. You can see it's collecting right down here in the bottom. A little bit longer here. So this experiment takes a little bit of patience here to get everything to strain out, and then once we get going, I'll have to pause it because it's going to take about 5 minutes for the DNA to separate out of the solution. Okay, we're getting there. We'll try to get probably as much as we can to go and drop down there. Okay, oops, spilled a little bit. All right, that should be pretty good. I'm going to set this aside now. Okay, and I'm going to hold this up to the camera. You can see the banana solution down there. It's kind of cloudy here. All right, now this part takes some finagling here, so you got to be real cautious with this. The isopropyl alcohol, it's going to form a layer on top. You might remember from 6th grade learning about density. Density makes things layer. We don't want these two to mix. We want a layer of the alcohol to sit on top of the solution. And so to do that, we need to drip it down the side of the container, not pouring it in. So I'm going to start doing that very cautiously and carefully, dripping it down the side. Trying to be as slow and easy as I can. You may see from the video that it's beginning to form a layer on top. Okay, so you should be able to see a very distinct layer on top. Oh, and it's already starting to work. You can see the DNA rising up off the top of the surface. Let me hold it real close to the camera. See those little strands coming up? So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to give it a moment or two. We'll start the next video after the DNA really begins to separate, and I'll try to get some out of the jar.